Hi, welcome back to my busy corner. This is lesson 18. I was going to do a video on question and answer, but I'm going to delay that so that I can show you another blanket throw while everything is still fresh in my mind from lesson 17. So, this is another version. I have so far knitted 47 rows, and I have spent 94 minutes knitting, and as you can see, it is over 6 feet long. I was actually going to use all my skeins. I have been using, I'm in my 4th, 5th, and 6th skein now. I'm holding 3 strands together. But really, it's long enough. And so I'm going to use the leftover yarn to make a pillow. So I put on 30 stitches on the very largest pipes. And I changed the way I'm holding these on here, because with this many stitches, 30 stitches, and 3 strands of yarn, you can see how tightly packed that was. And on these big pipes, it wanted to slide back over the cotter pins. So, and you can also see I've put on a clothespin here just to help keep my stitches from falling off the front. It'd be better if this gripped tighter, frankly. But you can see that what I've done is replace my cotter pins. And this is so the knitting doesn't slide down onto these rods. Now, a little aside here. If you wanted to, you could, when you put your big cover pipe on, you could create more or less a cone with tape and cardboard and create almost what happens when you use circular knitting needles, when you know there's, the part you knit with, and there's that long string that connects the two. And I tried it that way, but I didn't like having to keep working them up. And the reason you would put the tape and cardboard around this portion is so you could easily move them from the skinny part back up to this fat part. But it's a little tricky to do it that way. But anyway, I made myself a couple of stops. And all I used for this was, in fact, I keep these in my craft room because I'm using these all the time for goofy things. And a pair of garden pruners. And these are just skewers that you buy, for shish kebab. You can use anything as long as it fits in your hole, but it's going to have to be long enough to stop the yarn from going all the way back. You can even use these if your hole is big enough. They're, 1/8 inch dowel rods. You can get them in the craft store. And then just nip off your wooden stick, and then I glued a bead on there, and I used it in place of my cotter pin. And that stops the yarn from going all the way down, because getting it back up onto the pipe was a bit of a hassle. So this is one reason you might want longer pipes. If you're going to be doing a lot of throws, I had to really pack them on. And you'll see, we're going to do a row. Each row only took me 2 minutes. And here was one little dilemma. I wanted to make another throw for this video. And I went to the craft store, and they didn't have, I knew it would take at least 6 skeins. I thought maybe it'd be 8 or 12. They didn't have that many skeins in the same dye lot. They had them in the same color. Now, with marled colors, again, I'm using the same type of yarn I used the last time. This is Homespun Thick and Quick, and these are all marbled yarns. So these tend not to mismatch as much as a solid color yarn will be. If you're using solid color, for sure you always want to get the same dye lot. You could risk it with something like this. What I decided to do instead, since I couldn't get enough of the same dye lot in one color, and I would have had to order it online and wait, I bought 8 skeins, and I'm going to be returning some because I don't need it all. So I bought 8 skeins in 3 different colors. I knew I wanted to hold 3 strands together, and frankly, I didn't like any of these on their own. It wasn't quite what I was looking for. So this was kind of a happy problem that I couldn't get enough in one color. So I used 3 strands, using 1 strand of each at a time. This color is Barley, and this one is Woodland Stripes. Normally I wouldn't use a stripe. Oh, it is a stripe. Well, I didn't even know that. Okay. I don't like striped yarns when I'm working. Okay, and this one is, I just noticed that, Painted Desert. But I liked the colors. I knew if I combined them, it would come up with something that looks very different. And I like this. I like how this is turning out. And again, I have spent only an hour and a half so far knitting. Each row is taking me, as I said, 2 minutes. And I am going to show you one row. I did it in seed stitch, just as I did the last one. And as I said, I saw a really cute pillow online where she used several, of course she was using knitting needles, several strands of yarn together to make a pillow, and she put on 14 stitches. So that's what I'm going to do with my leftover yarn. Now, as always, I have my 3 skeins of yarn in this basket. Let me take out this. And you can see I have just under a half a skein of each of these left. And I think I'll have enough to at least make the front of a pillow. I'm going to try it. And if not, I'll turn it into a scarf. But the point is, I have it in a basket with some polyester fabric so it doesn't grab the yarn. And I do it just like always. I just pull them like this. Pull off a bit before you start a row. I never wind my yarns together. And the reason is, there's oftentimes, the minute you do that, it's going to be a combination you don't like once you get started. And once you've taken your yarn and balled them all together, if I were to take all this off and ball them up so that the 3 strands come off all at once, invariably there's going to be one of those colors you don't like. And it's very hard to undo. The second thing is, once you've done that and kind of twisted them around, they actually twist around themselves. And it's not as pretty as just having them, you know, laying next to each other. You kind of want them just to lay next to one another. So, anyway, this is seed stitch, just like the blanket I did in lesson 17. And by the way, that blanket is actually quite warm, even if in its lacy structure. We put it on top of our bed and we love it. So just as a little extra blanket on a cool night. Now, there's something else I did differently this time. I realized when I was weaving in my ends of the last row, I said, why did I do this? I'm going to knot them anyway. I'm not really going to weave them in. So when I ran out of my first skeins, I was able to knit 29 rows with my first set of skeins. We'll call them that, my first set of skeins. About 28, 29 rows. One skein was shorter than the other. I just tied a square knot when I started my new skein and cut it. Didn't weave it in, and I didn't do what I did on the last row. And I think, especially for this kind of yarn, you're never going to see that knot. And it's the only way to hold it in this loose structure anyway. So, this is the largest pipes. I started it on smaller, but it was too tight, but it will be perfect for the pillow. And this is the 1.5 inch pipe. That's the inside diameter. The actual outside diameter is... What is the actual outside diameter? It's like 1 7/8, and the circumference is almost 6 1/8. Just for reference, and you can check your pipes at home. And again, it's 3 strands, 1 strand of each color held together. I use this clothespin to help hold it on the front. And again, this is seed stitch, just as I did the last one, but I am going to show you something here, and I didn't point this out on the last one. Again, if you want to use longer pipes, the one advantage to that, I start with the front stitch. I have an even number of stitches on, just like last time. So there's 30 stitches. Snug up your first one. This stitch, if Joe can get close enough. It's a little harder to see here. You can tell I did that as a front stitch, so I need to do a back stitch. When I'm working with this very large pipes, I might actually use 2 fingers to hold my yarn. You can see this was a back stitch, so I need to do a front stitch. Make sure you're only putting the new stitch up on the pipe. No bow tie sign. I know that was a front stitch. Has to be a back stitch. One of the things I love about knitting this way is it's very hard to make a mistake. If you're watching, you are looking at every previous stitch, and it's almost impossible to screw it up. I still like to hold, if I'm moving from left to right, again this will be row 48. I didn't click my clicker, but this is row 48. It's almost impossible to screw it up. But you can see that I'm taking it off, using my fingers to kind of make the stitch larger to get it on the pipe, snug it up a bit, especially if you're making the stitch very big. I'm exaggerating this for your benefit. See? That was a front stitch. I have to make a back stitch. Normally, you know, I don't stretch it quite that far. I might even use my other left hand to widen that stitch a bit before I put it up on the pipe. And just as before, now what you're going to find, you want to make sure you've pulled off enough yarn, or you might have to stop occasionally. Now, you're going to have to grab, at some point you need to grab the front of your rod and push this back. And I make my stitches pretty tight, so I almost need to use my both hands to push that back. You don't have to make your stitches this tight, but be consistent. And if you do, and you do it for the entire piece, it will be much prettier. And you can see, it's starting to run out of room on the front of my pipe. You're going to have to give, but you'd be surprised how far back, how much room you actually have on these 12-inch pipes is basically what I'm trying to show you. But if you're going to be doing a lot of throws, or if you want to change your striping in any way, see, I was talking, I almost made the wrong stitch there. You might want longer pipes. As you get towards the end, that's when things get a bit tricky. Again, when you pull it off, just pull them up in the air, and they'll unwind into your basket. And that's much easier than trying to ball up all three. I mean, you would have spent an hour and a half just balling up your yarn, and that's just crazy. This is my last stitch. It's a back stitch, and I've completed what I'm going to say is my last row. And you will cast off in exactly the same fashion. In this case, we're working from this side. So pull off some yarn for yourself into your basket. We're going to cast off in the same manner we did in lesson 17. I'm going to begin with the front stitch. And as I said, when you are doing seed stitch, as this piece is, all of your stitches are going to alternate. And that's what gives you a reversible pattern that lays flat, as I said, a lacy structure. So put on your 2 stitches. You're going to do it in pattern. So I did a front stitch, a back stitch. Now I'm going to cast off by taking my very first stitch over the second stitch I made. Here's my bow tie sign. I know I need to make a front stitch. Pipe it, cast it off. Don't cast on too tightly or cast off too tightly, or your edge will pucker. Notice I'm using my one finger to kind of hold the rest back. I'm also holding my working yarn here a bit so that I can more easily pull that stitch over. As I'm talking, I keep forgetting what stitch I need to do. There's a back stitch. So you're casting off in pattern just as we did in lesson 17. And as I said, my next video will be questions and answers. I'm going to show you a really neat cast on I found on this site in the UK. And I think it will be easier for those of you who are having trouble with these large pipes. And you would just, continue in this fashion until you are completely cast off. And we might as well do it because we're almost there now. Hello, Ginger. You going to help us? My dog's never been in the video before. There she is. She's a very special dog, I might add. Alright, here we go. We are almost finished. Whoops, that was a back stitch. You can either repipe it if you want, or just do it in your hand. And again, you're going to have to reach down. I think I'm going to have just enough for at least the front of a pillow. As I said, you're going to need quite a bit of yarn for each of your stitches. As your pipes were almost 1/6 and 1/8 around. And as I said, if you wanted to try it, put more stitches on, you could even try taping around the back of your pipes. But I found that to be a bit cumbersome as far as getting my stitches back up. But if you put some cardboard around there and tape it, it will be easier. I was able to get this yarn on sale at Joann Fabrics, so it was 20% off, and I had a coupon for another 20% off. So each of these skeins was only $6.24 with tax. Oops, I almost forgot to cast that one off. I was thinking about money. Alright, $6.24. So if you used, consider that you were going to use 6 skeins in this, it would cost you, with tax, $37.44 on sale. And that's not bad. With wedding season coming up, I think this could make a nice shower or even wedding gift. Now you're down to your last stitch. You see, here's my working yarn. So let me get some scissors, which I didn't bring to my table. And you won't need much to cut here because you're just going to knot it. Now take off your last stitch. Here's your working yarn coming through. So put your fingers through, your thumb and your index finger. Grab that tail of your working yarn. Pull it through. And I'll probably do it one more time through there and knot it. And now you are finished. And you have a beautiful throw that took, well, you saw what I just did, and I'd only knit just over an hour and a half before that. So in less than an hour, 45 minutes. And I would have knit that a little faster, that last couple rows there. Anyway, so let's look at it from the end. So that's well over 6 feet, I would say. And I'm not measuring this. What is it? 3 feet? 30 inches at least. Figure an inch per stitch, but this was pretty fat. So there you have it. That's how to make a beautiful throw in just over an hour and a half. And I did a total of 48 rows plus my cast off row, and I'll put all those instructions in the description and the colors I used for the throw. Thanks for watching.